for the folks that are in attendance tonight, hey, I really appreciate you joining us. I'm super excited, and we're the company. We're very proud to host this. Um, it's a unique opportunity to, I think, interact very intimately here with Ross. And so now I just like to hand it off to Mr. Ross Shrigley, the Executive Director of Plant Select. And Ross, thank you so much. Really super kind of you to do this. And we're excited to have you. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for the intro. Welcome, and thanks everybody for showing up. This will be really fun. So, a little bit about my background is that I grew up in Denver here, and I watched the boom of, a slow boom, not like a Wyoming boom, of people moving in, and it's really cool because by the time I went to college at CSU and got a degree in biology, I hold on here. I had I the time I got a degree in biology, I bought a gardening business because I didn't want to work in a lab and I loved being outdoors. So, at any rate, about that time in 95, Plant Select was just starting. And I used to go to the nurseries and you used to ask, like, what do you got new for my customers? And what is interesting? What's really cool? And that's how I used to get new plants. And back in the 90s, I'd go in and they'd say, well, this could have been a Plant Select plant, or this was going to be a Plant Select plant. And I'd be like, what's that? That's ridiculous. Plant Select. And then all of a sudden, I would buy those plants, put them in in my customers' yards, and come back thinking, oh, this one's probably not going to make it because I know that customer. They don't take care of their plants in aftercare. And all of a sudden, I'm like looking at red hot pokers and really cool plants going, these things are really tough and they look fantastic and they're so unusual. That was my introduction to Plant Select. And now, over a long, wild path of working on facilities at CSU, having my own gardening business, working at Denver Botanic Gardens as a senior horticulturist for 7 years, and then working as outside sales for Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery, which is the nursery here that's a native plant nursery. That's what got me into a lot of Wyoming places. And that's my introduction to the Wyoming Plant Company, as a matter of fact, with Tom Heald. Used to go up, visit him. It was a different world back in 2012 before you have, what is that, the David Street Inn, that complex that's right across the way, which is pretty phenomenal. And it's really exciting too, when I have, from an outsider's perspective of Casper. I love Casper, but there's some challenges there. And one is they don't have a city forester, it's the parks person. And I think one of the biggest values to a city is having having a city forester. And then the other one is that, oh no, what was I going to say? Oh, to Casper is, oh, now I forgot. I lost that thought. It'll come back to me. But I love going up there because I see the most unusual things. Like I think, oh, nothing will live here like that. And then I see these zone 5 plants and I see plants that I can't even buy anymore that are up there. And I thought they wouldn't be, survive, and they do. So Casper has really, oh, that's the other thing. That's what I was going to talk about was from the outside looking in, Casper's at a size of people where in terms of nurseries, it's let's put it this way. In terms of nurseries, they feel like they have competition with one another, and I don't think they do. And one of the best things about Kelly purchasing Wyoming plants is that he has this broad, open, welcoming kind of perspective. And that is what is really needed in Casper, Wyoming, in my opinion. So kudos to you, Kelly, and I hope that didn't come across as negative or anything, but it's really a positive thing. So Wyoming Gardens, he's pushing it forward. And I just want to remind people we need to keep muted for one. So if you want to do that, and then I also want to, oh, there we go. I also wanted to remind people that this is where we live. We live in a short grass prairie. And so I love going to the prairie. It's a very different experience than going to the mountains and going to where there are trees. And usually when I ask people where they're from, it's not because I care about them coming to Colorado or Wyoming or wherever. It's because I want to know their background perspective on trees. My wife's from Wisconsin, and what she thinks of a tree is very different than what I think of a tree. It's very short. Here, our trees are shorter, and Wyoming's trees are even shorter. But anyway, onward with some plants. So plant select really comes down to what grows well in our climate. This is the program we started to test these plants in the ground, and that's what we do. This is the wine cups. This is a native plant to the Midwest, more east than Wyoming or Colorado. But it's more, they call it a ground cover, but it's not really that it roots out as it grows out. It comes from a really big tap root, and then it's also edible. Anyway, it creeps out and then fills out a big mat. And I like this plant next to to walkways because when it sort of gets trampled on the edges, it actually gets bushier. It's a fantastic plant. It blooms from April to hard frost, and it's great pollinator. Fantastic plant. Easily and readily available now. But Plant Select, beautiful, resilient, water-wise plants for our region. That's what it is. And we are a collaboration of Colorado State University, Denver Botanic Gardens, and the horticulture industry. We could not operate without one of these features in terms of our board. Denver Botanic Gardens, when you think of a botanic gardens, they bring plants from around the world all together. And then those plants that have never seen each other because of mountains and oceans and things like that, all of a sudden their sister plants are starting to hybridize and you get new plants. Now those plants come out of DBG, or a lot of them did. This is how the program started. And then Colorado State University would be kind of the studies and the authority on the study behind testing them. And then the horticulture industry, you have to have them because they have to grow the plants. If you don't have anybody growing the plants, you don't really have a program. So the university can be changed out, the botanic gardens could be changed out in any other business model, but you always got to have the horticultural industry involved. And I think that's a component that's missed a lot of times these days in these nonprofit plant introductory things. What we do is test our plants for 3 years, longer for trees and shrubs. We try to do them in multi-site trials around Colorado at high elevations and down south where Pueblo is a different environment completely. And then we get together and we look at the plants more closely, and our considerations for a successful plant select plant would be the number one thing is it flourishes with less water. I'm not going to speak to water really that much tonight, but that's a huge concern in our region, and everybody should be paying attention to it. Thrives in diverse conditions. That means soil differences, but it also means freeze thaws. I think down here we get a lot more freeze thaws than you do in Wyoming, and that's a killer of plants because they start to wake up in the middle of the winter and then they get hammered with a freeze. Tough and resilient, changing climates as we get warmer, things like that. One of a kind, unique, resistant to disease, obviously, and habitat friendly. That's becoming more and more important. What does it offer for an ecological service in our urban environments? That's a big deal. And there's a lot of people looking at how that all fits together. Long lasting beauty and, of course, non invasive. So just because a plant is right for Wyoming or even Colorado does not mean it's the right plant for Tennessee. And we need to, Plant Select is trying to make that more clear across the nation. A lot of people are asking, with the native movement, like, whoa, what are we doing? How come not all the plants you recommend are natives? Well, we promote right now about 180 plants, and of those, 50% of them are North American natives. That's really great. And with the changing climate, you may want those plants from New Mexico to be in Colorado, or those plants in Colorado to be in Wyoming. And then 45, just because it's Colorado focused, I didn't measure up how many are native to Wyoming. It's not 45. I know that it's less, but there's still a lot of overlap. But at least 45 of those plants are native to Colorado, which is really close. So who else partners with Plant Select? We have, a lot of partners. We have licensed propagators across the country, retail garden centers such as Wyoming Plant. We have landscape professionals. Rodolph up there is a landscape professional member of Plant Select. Um, Wholesale members, mail order nurseries like High Country Gardens. 62 public gardens are also participants. They do demonstration gardens, and we even have municipalities and also botanic gardens that are licensed propagators. This is kind of our breakdown of different memberships. We started off with, okay, only garden centers and growers are going to be members. And then it was kind of like, well, Lensburg professionals want to be part. So we opened up a membership for them. And then now we have Plant Select individual ambassadors, of which we have over 200 people, and it's $35 a year, and you get more webinars like this. But anyway, that's for another conversation. But we have a lot of different membership things. But here's the guts of our program right here. If you go to plants on the plantselect.org website, you're going to see a picture of each of these plants. You can go in and search. You can search by pollinators, by trees, by shrubs, by all these different kinds of things. And in this column underneath that tab of plants, you're going to find other tools, native origins of plants. I think this is a really cool one because I linked all the plants. There's two different tabs when you open this up, and you can sort them by Latin name, alphabetical or common name, or year introduced. But when you click on the links, if it's a native plant to North America, it'll go to the USDA plant database. And when you go there, you can dial in on the map and get it all the way down to county, which is super cool. If you go to the Sister Step Climate list of plants, it goes to Plants of the World Online, which is a website that's hosted by Kew Gardens, and they just do a way better job of international plants, and they also are more advanced than the U.S. on keeping up with the taxonic. Gosh, I can't have a problem with saying that. The botanic names on everything. So anyway, go to that page. Irrigation. I'm going to kind of breeze through this really quickly, but I said I wasn't going to cover it. But there is, when you look at moderate water, what does that mean? On our website, we've kind of determined that moderate water use is 2 inches per month, and then low water use is 1 inch per month, and xeric is 1 inch to establish, and then nothing after that. So if you wanted to calculate how much you are using, what I would recommend doing is going out there, and if you have an overhead sprinkler, you can put out a catch cup, and they actually sell them at your distributors, or even I think at like Home Depot might even have some. You run your clock for 20 minutes, then look at your catch cup, and it'll tell you how many inches of water was delivered per square foot. And if that is, let's say you ran your irrigation for 20 minutes and you got a 1/4 inch of water, if you only ran your irrigation once a week for a whole month, that is a 1/4 inch plus a 1/4 inch plus a 1/4 inch. That's 1 inch of water. That's low water use. Now, if you have a drip irrigation, you'll want to get the drip all together, stick it into that catch cup so that all the water goes in there, run your timer out, and then see how much water it is. But it's easy to calculate with the catch cup. And I think that what you're going to find is you can water your plants a lot less than what you're currently watering them at. And I challenge you to back the water off. I think it's great. You can go onto our website and see what Denver Botanic Gardens has put together for a best Western practices. And they talk about mulches. We're going to have more information coming out of Denver Botanic Gardens on studies with soil amendments and mulching, which conserves the most water, which is, radiates the most heat, which is the better for certain kinds of plants. That's still yet to come, but that's very, very exciting. And I have to say that a lot of the Western plants that we grow out here and Plant Select has are that are native are really lean in the soils. They are not add compost when you plant. Those are back east kinds of plants or vegetable garden plants. Those are not really the garden plants that we're working with here. You actually might want to think about adding squeegee, which is basically sort of like a pea gravel, but I think actually in the old days they used to sell it as road base. Pretty interesting. Also on the website, we have free designs, downloadable designs, and you could just print them off, take them to Kelly, and he could give you a quote. And there are some substitution ideas. But this is the kind of gardens that we're creating. This isn't like the gardens you see in Europe. Very different. Textures are different. Colors are different. Size of plants are different. Size of flowers are different. And I invite you to explore and imagine your front yard looking like this versus just turf and a tree. Now, this is the Denver Botanic Gardens at Chatfield demonstration garden for Plant Select, and Grace Johnson, who does a fantastic job on that. She used to work at Missouri Botanic Gardens, is very well versed in meadows and things like that. She's wonderful. She knows maintenance and she knows plants and design. But when we get back to the original or the urban sort of gardening, um, I think this is a really good image that we should absorb and think, what is this? Does this look like a garden I'd see over in England? Maybe, but not all the way. But the thing that it has about it is that there's some continuity through it. You can see, let me see if I can do this. These aren't even these aren't really Plant Select plants, but this is Lady's Mantle here and here and here. So you got continuity, lamb's ear, lamb's ear. We have some sort of geranium in here. We do have some grasses that are tucked in there, I know. I believe this is a Plant Select plant, a cashmere sage, which is Phlomis cashmeriana. There's some larkspur back here. But at any rate, there's definition within the garden, and every plant is touching. And this garden gets watered once every 10 days. I think instead of layering and having big flowers a lot of times, I use iris always as an example because they have the biggest flowers and everybody loves them and they've got like a 2 week bloom time. And I can't poo-poo iris because they actually are very xeric. They're more drought tolerant than you'd ever guess, and so I always include iris in my gardens. I usually pick the more dwarf German bearded kind because they are big flowers on short stalks, and when they show, they show. If it's a wet year, and if they don't, I've got other things going on. But anyway, this is a garden for the urban landscape I think we could look at. So these next plants, I put them in, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know if they're going to live. This one here, Ever Silver Creeping Germander, it's one of my most favorite plants. And the reason is that it's silver all year round. In Colorado, at least, where there's no snow, let's say you have a slope and the snow comes, it melts, it comes, it melts. You have an opportunity to actually grow a bunch of evergreen herbaceous perennials. And I think people are missing it that our winter gardens are way better than our summer gardens because they're less maintenance. If you do all your work to prepare in the fall, all you got to do is watch it. There's no weeding, there's no deadheading. They're different colors for sure. But this plant is silver. It grows out, absolutely no water. It's silver all year round, and you get about 3 to 4 weeks in May to June. You get these purple flowers, and it's fantastic. There's, like I said, there's no maintenance to this plant in Colorado. And if you grew it in a crevice garden, a very porous media situation, it might be hardy up there. I just wanted to throw it out. Same with this one. These were this year's Plant Select plants. This was a really great lamb's ear substitute. It's fuzzy and it usually goes it goes and goes dormant, and it'll go all the way to the ground come somewhere in January, and then it pops back out in February, late February or March. But look at that color. The flowers, the panicles are very compact. They're a pale yellow. This part down here in the lower part, that's what before they bloom, and they're all green. Bees absolutely love this plant. It's another, it doesn't spread through runners like it does, like lamb's ear does, but this is a completely great substitute for it. It's going to get like 1.5 feet wide, and it's only going to get to, what, 12 inches tall. It's a really good plant. Here it is with another fantastic plant, which I think will do all right up there. It is that purple flower plant is Stachy's lavendulifolia, also known as pink cotton lamb's ear. It's a very low growing, and actually it's a Stachy's, which means it is a lamb's ear, but it's more of the Bethany form where they have a narrower leaf and long veins, and it only gets to around, the foliage will only grow 6 inches or so, and then above it in late spring you get these cotton candy flowers with little like chiclets of purple in there. It's the funniest, weirdest kind of flower, but the bees love it, especially bumblebees. And for those who are pollinators, I can share with you about Colorado. We have over 1,000 native bees in Colorado, and they're probably dying faster than we can actually count them. And in Larimer County alone, there's 493. I know there's a lot up in Wyoming. I don't have those numbers, but any bumblebee is a North American native bee, and to support those things is fantastic. So this that lavandula this is it when it just grows on its own. Wonderfully well-behaved plant. I'd really like it. I know Kelly should be able to get this one, and just fantastic. So in terms of herbs, I had the question about some herbs, and we are going to have a new herb coming out next year, but this is one that's been in the program for a long time. Curly leaf sea kale. This is native to the Mediterranean, has these huge bluish thick kale leaves. And in the springtime, May through into June, you have these white flowers that just cover the whole thing. You don't even see the foliage. And it'll get like 2 feet tall, 2 feet wide. It's a perfect mound, full of pollinators. It's just a fantastic flowering plant. Now, it can go to seed if you have a lot of them. It doesn't really require any water at all. But the maintenance tip on this is to, after it flowers, is to actually cut it down to the base or right before it gets really hot, and it'll leaf out again, and then it won't flower, and you'll have this wonderful textured leaves that are fresh. And this is a plant that a friend of mine, or the owner of Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery, actually coined the phrase ornedible. And that means it's an ornamental plant that's listed in, it's an edible plant that's listed in the ornamental categories of plants. So he's calling it, this is an ornedible. And there's a lot of them like that. But this plant could feed an army if it was used all the time. So I actually put this into our vegetable garden at our house so that I didn't have to actually do so many vegetables every year, because I can eat this. And if you catch the flower stalks before they open up, it's a lot like broccoli or asparagus, and I know there's a recipe out there that's got to be colored green like that. You add a bunch of butter and bacon, and you're going to have a fantastic meal. Anyway, fantastic plant. Penstemons. We get into penstemons. Now, for people in Wyoming, I'm not sure that they're aware of the Utah has the most penstemons in the country in terms of taxa. Colorado has a lot, but Wyoming has the Wyoming has a lot of rock garden alpine plants, more than Colorado does, and we have a lot of tours that go up to the Bighorns to look at little alpine plants. And I'm not even sure anybody knows that up there. And I think I've mentioned to Kelly before. It's like, oh, we got to swing those people through your shop because they're going up there to look at plants. And it's just that the plants are there, the community behind them and using them isn't. And anyway, this desert bearded tongue is one of the toughest plants. And down here, it almost gets too big for me. It's like almost 2 feet tall. It blooms in late spring. It has these sort of pink fuchsia flowers. Hummingbirds love it. As it gets colder, what I usually do is cut those flowers off after they're done. It will go to seed around, and you'll find it in your driveway. You'll find, if it's gravel driveway, you'll find it in all these weird kinds of cracks. It's really wonderful. It goes up to super high elevations. I think 8,400 feet down towards Bayfield, Colorado. You will see this, and it only grows to about foot tall, which is perfect if you ask me. I don't like to water this plant too much because it gets too leggy. And that is the desert bearded tongue that's on the left. And you can see it's native down very south, but it'll be hardy all the way up there. Then we have the silver map, blue map penstemon, which is native to the Four Corners of Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and it only gets to about 10 inches tall. It is it is it's a beautiful lavender sort of flowers. The bees absolutely love it. And this penstemon, Penstemon linearoides almost looks like a pine leaf penstemon. The needles, the leaves are very long and narrow, and they're very, very soft. And this plant will bloom for about 3 weeks and very short, perfect for crevices. But then when it finishes blooming, you shear off the flowers, and this one will definitely be evergreen for you in the wintertime. And a lot of these penstemons are that way. And so if you plant enough of them out in a spot that's just not covered in snow all year, you will see patches of green, which I think helps all of us in our mentality. What kinds of environments would you put these in? Maybe something like this. When I think about what's in front of our houses and drive down the street, I ask myself, I'm looking at tree lawn, tree lawn, tree lawn, tree lawn with outlined by rocks. And, we got to get through this. It's just ugly. This to me is probably one of the most sustainable, sensible, beautiful sorts of low maintenance landscapes that I think that we should strive to go for. Ooh, now I'm seeing some chats. Sorry, I will try to. Oh, good. Keeping weeds out of gravel rocks. Yeah, I'll go into that for sure. And so anyway, this is a style that I think is easily accomplished. You can do this with buffalo grass, but you can also do this with a hybrid Bermuda grass like dogtuff, which I won't talk about in this program, but it's on our website. But you have a creeping grass that grows around, and then you have these salvia or these Artemisia frigida sage that goes throughout. There's even some other plants in there. And the point I show this, or why I show this to you, is when people think of a meadow, they think, oh, it's really easy. You cast out a bunch of seed and you walk away and you're good. Well, that's not the case, because usually all those seeds germinate, they grow big plants, and all those seeds germinate, and then you have usually one plant will take over the whole area. In a short grass prairie, that's a lot more easy to manage. So you could mow this once a year and it wouldn't just turn into one plant the whole year. But walking through this, the point of it is that you have a bird's eye view of a whole bunch of plants, and meadows are about discovery. You're looking down. So as you go down this path, as you go down this path way down here, you will come down to the top view of this Delosperma up here by this rock. You'll see another penstemon, pine leaf penstemon, stepsons right here. And think about walking through a low grass meadow and then being surprised by something in there. That's what you should look at those things in terms of, ideas for new garden spaces. This is what it looks like in the November, which is pretty spectacular. Kelly, do you grow Arctostaphylos? I can't remember if I've seen them up there. I don't think that they're completely hardy. I think Donna says that Panchito is, but I'm not quite sure. So I don't push those up there, but if they are, it's a fantastic plant.
I don't push them either. I know some people have tried them. I don't know long-term results on them.
Yeah, I haven't seen any big ones, but anyway, we'll see what happens. So we're getting there. But this is a fantastic low growing plant that would go in there along the edges of your sidewalks. This is a winter fire sedum. It's in the summertime. I don't know if everybody's aware of Angelina, but that's one of the most popular of the sedum. It's now technically Petrosedum rupestre, but it's Angelina is chartreuse, very, very chartreuse. Beautiful plant. It flowers too in the spring or late spring, but it's so chartreuse that it's almost gets old. This one is sort of a rustic chartreuse in the summertime, but it's called winter fire because it turns a dark maroon, and you can almost watch this plant change colors from early morning when it's cold to more green towards noon, and then it goes back down into, as it gets colder in the evening, back down into a dark maroon. Fantastic little plant. I don't care for the flowers. They're yellow. They come up on those big long stems, these things right here. I usually just, after the bees are done with them, I just mow them down and let it be. And it's really easy to spread around because, geez, you don't even have to plant these things. You just throw the seeds, or not the seeds, but you can get the sedum strains. Actually, they'll root out if you give it some water and look after it a little bit. So it's a good plant to be a filler. Another plant, this is, you don't see this plant coming out of other programs like proven winners or whatever, but this is a really cool plant. Penstemon cespitosus. It's a ground cover, basically. It's not as aggressive or grows out as fast as like Veronicas, but it has these nice, beautiful sort of Kelly green, spoon-shaped scoop leaves, and it just keeps growing out in a mat form. Now, this mat here is probably several plants planted together that grew together, but look how this is that Angelina that I was talking about. And it's doing fine. It's not getting grown over. It's holding its own to something that is taller, and you would have thought it would have been out. It's cat approved, of course, but if you look deep down in here, you'll find and you can see like little gems of all these little penstemon flowers that are this lavender blue. It blooms early June through July, and you'll still see little blooms into August, to be honest with you. Very low water. I do think it does need some water. I think this plant does better in Wyoming than it'll do here, at least in full sun. I like this plant where it's hidden from western sun most of the time. It's not a walkable plant like thyme. So this blue mat penstemon sort of gets a little bit woody, and when you walk on it too much, the stems can sort of break, especially in the wintertime, and then that branch will be dead, and then you'll see that show up later on. But this is also another plant that is woody and green through the wintertime in the right spot. We will get to weeds, promise. This one's a super hardy plant, and I think I see this up there all the time. It's zone 3. If you're not using it, we're going to have another one coming out here that gets bigger and taller. Orange carpet hummingbird trumpet. It only grows to like 4 to 6 inches tall, and then like 18 inches wide. This is a plant that I see in Fort Collins at rental houses. And then the renters change and everything else in the landscape starts to die down. This is the plant that stays. It blooms in the fall. I've actually seen this hummingbirds sit on the ground and get nectar from these tubular flowers that are about 1.5 to 2 inches long. And up in Cheyenne, it's so amazing. But it blooms in late August all the way till frost. The problem with these epilobiums, which it used to be known as Oceanaria, the problem with these epilobiums is that they do bloom so late that in previous years, sometimes we've had snow that's been early, and then that just clobbers them, and so you don't get to enjoy them that year. But this is a fantastic plant that just keeps creeping out very, very slowly, almost as a bigger mat. And I think that you can make huge expanses of these if you want to fill up, let's say, your gravel driveway, or let's say I've seen a lot of people use this somebody has a driveway, and then they bought a house where they used to park a boat next to it that has weed barrier cloth and it has gravel in it. I highly recommend you just rip that weed barrier cloth out and keep a mulch, a gravel mulch that's about 4 inches thick. And you could plant this in it and it would be just fine. I'll have more examples of that. But if you have a 4-inch gravel mulch, I think that's one of the key things to keeping weeds down, especially annual grasses, annual seeds that germinate every year. It doesn't keep out things like bindweed. It doesn't keep out things like thistle, those pollinator plants that have runners. But it does reduce the annual weed pressure by a lot. And if you water less, that's the other strategy for keeping weeds down in gravel areas, is make sure you don't hit it with any water. Watering requirements. Oh, this is another really cool thing, is that on our website, I have a water guide to each plant. And this is a low water plant. So 1 inch per month after it's established is going to do just fine. And while I mention that, the other thing is that I have maintenance schedules, commercial maintenance schedules for each plant. And the reason for that is because if you're at an HOA and you want to utilize new plants, and the landscape contractor might be telling you, oh, I don't know how to, that looks all too confusing. I don't know how to maintain these plants. Most of our plants you just like mow down once a week or once a year. But you can actually you could recommend that they go look at this maintenance schedule and they can hand it out. gives it every annual and every 5-year maintenance for all of our plants. Very useful for contractors that don't know plants. I know this one is one that I'm not sure that Kelly brings in. It may be a little bit harder to find, but it is a great zone for a plant. This plant is an absolute no water prairie zinnia, gold on blue. This one is a low growing. It blooms in the heat of the summer. If you ever travel south and get into Grand Junction, you'll start to see this on rock screes and in the most inhospitable places where you'd think a plant would be growing, and they will look beautiful green and have these wonderful flowers with that orange sort of center. It's a great pollinator plant. It's phenomenal. Um, Flowering June to August. I can't say enough about this plant. Should be utilized a lot more. Um, but another low growing plant, perfect for along your sidewalks or a crevice garden or something like that, or the front of a perennial border. This was a plant that came out. This is Stepson's Sunset Glow Penstemon. This is a plant that came out of well, it was actually came out of from Ray Daughtry, who used to teach at Front Range down in Denver, and he kind of passed this work on to Mike Bone. And Mike Bone, he has red hair and he's a propagator down there. Anyway, he liked this plant a lot and has brought it to the program. He's brought more, but we named this in his honor Stepsons, because he's all about steps across the world and he travels to them all the time. But Stepsons is this. It looks orange from far away, but in reality, or melon from far away. But in reality, it's more yellow on the inside of the petals, and then it's orange on the outside. It only gets tops 15, 16 inches. It's more compact than the straight species. Again, this will bloom from, oh, it'll bloom from late July into June, and then, or late June into July. And again, it's a penstemon that if you shear it back, you can get a second bloom on this one. But if you shear it back again or in the fall, you'll have that patch of green through the wintertime. You can see up front here, this is Sedum Tall Tales, which looks beautiful with that plant, this Stepsons Sunset Glow. This is actually Penstemon mexicali, Pikes Peak Purple, I believe. But there's a very beautiful vignette of plants there. Now, also to remind you that penstemons are very deer resistant. I failed to mention that before, but when we come across all these penstemons, it's another great reason to use them. This is pine leaf penstemon. This is actually a dwarf red form of the pine leaf penstemons that have been on the market before. It was an introduction, kind of brought to Plant Select by David Solomon. It has a scarlet red to it, more than just like a straight, I don't know, a straight red. But anyway, the hummingbirds and the hawk moths, again, they love it. This only gets 8 to 10 inches tall. You have to plug in a lot of these because they only get, over a lot of time, they'll get about 12 inches wide. But if you want to fill up in an area, I would plant at least 5, and I would put them at about a foot apart. And then you'll fill up that area. Yeah, full sun, part shade. Most of these that I've been talking about is full sun, part shade. I'll start to focus more on the shady kinds of stuff here soon too. Canna Creek buckwheat. This has to be one of my favorites, and everybody should have this in your yard. Most people don't know what it does in the wintertime, but in the spring, it blooms yellow. This plant is native to Colorado. It came out of Canna Creek on the western slope, but it blooms yellow, and it sometimes can have weird different, as it matures, the petals can change and they get a little bit more orange, but they have a beautiful glossy green, round, evergreen leaf. And you can see that right here along the margins of this plant. And just like that winter fire, it changes with the color of the season. This is what it looks like in the wintertime. Most people do not recognize this plant. They go, what is that? And it's like, that's Canna Creek buckwheat. That's that yellow flowering plant in the spring. It blooms May to June or May to July. It only gets 12 to 16 inches when it's in flower. the foliage really only gets to about 6 inches. It can get quite large, like almost 2 feet over time. Very low water. I would recommend low water to no water with this, depending on if it's by a house where you have a drain spout or something like that. Such a great plant. Can't speak enough to it. Um, yeah. In terms of deer resistant, it is deer resistant as well. That's crazy. So I want to look at more gardens because, you know, this isn't Europe. And I love this garden. This is a garden that you can actually Google on Google Maps. It's down in Denver. It's a house lot west in Wash Park area. And it's such a cool place because it was designed by Kevin Williams at Denver Botanic Gardens, who's an up and coming designer plantsman. And this style of planting is more of a matrix style, which if you do research, came that design that terminology came out of Germany, where all the plants sort of mix together and they move about, and it's a living ecosystem is really what it's focused on. And this plant here, this is a lot of Linum lewisii, which is the blue flax that's native to the plains of Wyoming, Colorado, and things like that. And then there's a lot of other plants in here. But look at that style where it's just these little flowers that are dotted around, very meadowish, but not quite. Um, there's a lot of bigger shrubs in here. And in the fall, those shrubs like rabbit brush, dwarf rabbit brush, are all yellow, and it just changes the whole feeling of this garden. But I thought I'd share it. If you go to Denver, definitely drive by this garden. Here's another fantastic plant, easily achievable. This is the Aquilegia chrysantha. It's actually a native plant. It's yellow. Most people think of columbines as the blue and white. This one gets a little bit bigger. This is definitely a shade plant. It can also take full sun. I've seen this in medians, and I don't know how or who designed it to go out there, but it'll actually, when you drive by, you'll see this blotch of yellow, and it catches your eye, which is abnormal for a columbine. Blooms late spring, um, all the way to frost. It gets about 30 to 36 inches tall. Um, Sun, partial shade, zone 3. It's not deer resistant. Anyway, it's another fantastic sort of plant here. Let me hold on here a second. I think you guys use a lot of Agstachy rupestris as well. This wasn't on your list, Kelly, but this is a very popular plant. The sunset hyssop is one of the hardiest of all the hyssops that we offer and promote. It's native to New Mexico, but the hummingbirds love it. It gets, 2, 3 feet tall, 2 feet tall. It's taller more than it is wide, 20 inches wide, but the pollinators love it. And if you ever work with this plant and you get to brush up against it, it smells like licorice. It's so wonderful. And as a matter of fact, that licorice smell makes it makes it unpalatable for deer. Um, it likes dry areas. It really does not like to be stuck in snow all winter long. I wouldn't put this in a place that doesn't sort of melt out through the wintertime a little bit. The crown of the root crowns, if you have wood mulch, that will kill this plant in the wintertime and it won't come back. Now, this plant, granted, is actually a short-lived plant. It really only lives about 5 years, but it gets really short when it's too wet or around the root crown in the wintertime. Anyway, fantastic, wonderful plant to work with. Just the smell is phenomenal. Here's another plant should be in everybody's garden. This is that takes your gardening level like up by a million, I swear to God, because it's entertainment right in front of you. So I planted these plants. I've known about Liatris ligulostylus, meadow blazing star, for a long, long time, and it's more native to the tall grass prairie, but there's native patches here just north of Fort Collins. And then the ones in Fort Collins, they only grow to about a foot high, and that's it. But when you see these out in Nebraska, where they get 30 inches of rain near the Missouri River, they get like 6 feet tall. It's crazy. But the pheromone in this flower mimics the mating of monarchs. And, in the past, we haven't been on monarch flyways, but now we are. And the monarchs come and visit. And when you come home at night, you'll get out of your car and go visit this plant when it blooms in like 1st of August. You'll just all of a sudden be like, oh my gosh, this is just too much. Before you even let the dog out of the house, you go look at this plant to see what's on it and look for those wonderful monarchs because they will visit it. It's pretty stunning. Um, the trick with this plant is it goes to seed and you can grab the seeds later on, shake them all over wherever you want. You can water this plant a lot or water it a little. If you water it enough, it'll get a lot taller. They grow about 2 feet at my house, which is fine for me. But when they go to seed in the next spring, when you should recognize what this plant looks like as a seedling because it actually looks like a weed, another common weed. And I've found myself just going into auto mode, weeding, and then I'm like, oh darn, this is this is my liatris. So you don't want to do that, but you can usually tell at the bottom of the plant. This, when it's large, has a 2-inch corm, and it's hard. It's really kind of cool. But when you pull out the seedlings, it'll have like a little white bulbous corm on it, and that'll tell you that it's not that weed that you were thinking it could have been. Entertaining plant, fantastic. And is it deer resistant? It is. So you're going to laugh at how many deer resistant plants I think we actually have. And if you go to our Plant Select website, you can download a spreadsheet and sort it by deer resistant plants. Anyway, redbirds in a tree. I hope you sell this one. This is such a popular plant all around the country. I see tags being made for them out in New York. This plant is moderate to xeric. I don't think it likes to be stuck again in the wintertime in the snow. Um, but it'll bloom from June to frost, and it just attracts great pollinators and the hummingbirds and sphinx moths. I see it on all the time. But it's these cute little itty bitty flowers that just look like little red birds that really are the seller. And when you see those, you can't unsee them, and you're just like, wow, this is so cool. It blooms June all the way to frost. Has really nice sort of glossy leaves. Um, that picture is exactly what you would get if you grew that in Wyoming. Zone 4 should be just fine. Chocolate flower. This was one of Tom Heald's most favorite plants in the world. Like he could not get enough of it. This is native to the plains as well, and it is completely xeric. That picture on the left, you can see that curve there. That's right in front of my house. That plant has been there now for 5+ years, 6, 7, I don't know. But it blooms every year with no water, absolutely no water. And why is it called chocolate flower? Because in the dawn and in the dusk, when the air is still, it smells like Hershey's chocolate. It is phenomenal. It's so, so good. Um, and guess what? Even though it's called chocolate flower, it's deer resistant. Isn't that cool? You can actually collect the seeds on this as well. You can spread it around a little bit more. There's a little seed head there. But it's great as it grows. It doesn't really stand up on itself. It cascades over. It leans over. It only gets to like 15 inches, 18 inches tall before it starts to lean. But all those flowers are up top. I don't ever deadhead mine. Um, I just cut it back the next spring and let it do its thing. Such a phenomenal plant. More of that should be used everywhere. Now, Kelly did mention a plant, like what would you put around roses, maybe to deter the deer more? This is a plant that actually came out of Wyoming, was introduced by Kelly Grummins. It's not native to Wyoming. It's Artemisia arboretum, leprechaun. It's a dwarf southern wood. Basically, there's no flowers on this. I don't know how it's gone to seed, but Kelly went and he was doing some exploring, and along some of the old wagon trails, this must have fallen off somewhere in Wyoming, and it didn't naturalize. There was a few plants around, according to Kelly, but he submitted this because it has a very strong smell. It has a very uniform growth habit. It gets round like this. Really, this is a low water plant. You can get it with no water, but it just doesn't look it as good. You need to water it low water once a week, 1/4 of an inch. it'll get 24 inches, 36 inches tall, and just as wide. It's interesting because I never thought that you would want to buy this plant in a 5 gallon, but Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery started doing that, and it made me think, it made me realize something that I'd never realized before is this is a mini shrub. It's, I highly recommend you cutting it back every year. It'll leaf out from the top, but it looks ugly. So every spring, just cut it, shear it down to the base, 2 inches, and that'll be perfect. And you'll get this emerald green, really lightly textured, gorgeous plant. It smells like sage when you brush up against it, but it definitely, deer don't eat it, rabbits hate it. I would put this around your roses to deter them. And this, I recommend this one simply because it could fit around tea roses very easily. So then another plant here, this one is a shocker because this is marketed, I think, even on our site right now, is it says it's full sun. But you know what? Since this plant has been introduced, I've found it to be very full shade. So we actually put it in the dry shade trials down at Chatfield 2 years ago, and it's fine. I just don't think I've updated the data on the website yet. I'm not sure. I can't remember if I did or if my assistant did. But I put this at my house many years ago in dry shade under trees, and it is completely fine there. And as a matter of fact, if you water this plant and have it in full sun, it gets too big. I was riding around on my bike in Fort Collins and looking at the medians, and then I spotted the Fort Collins municipality median crew, and they were ripping all these out. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "They get too big," and so they were cascading over the edges of the curbs and going into the street. And I was like, "Well, why are you watering them? You're not supposed to water them after they're established." This is a really tough, beautiful plant, and this actually flowers and has an insect that is specific. I know in Colorado and I believe in Wyoming that is a specific host or feeds one flea that is important to it. But you wouldn't think about this plant because you never see any flowers. You barely see seed on it. But it's just a ground cover of Roostrella lobata, which normally gets like 6 feet tall as the normal size of these things. Perfect cascading plant for down slopes. It is deciduous. You'll see it just laying out like a octopus all the way around. Kelly, I hope you're not stressing. I'm going a little bit more over, but is that what I'm seeing? I could start flying through. If everybody's okay, I'll just keep going. Anyway, here's Blonde Ambition. This is a popular plant. This could easily be the next Carl Forster. And Carl Forster to me is like the Wyoming state grass. But this one's closer to native. It's phenomenal. This is at the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens. So in the heat of the summer, come July, it gets quite big, this plant. We have the native blue grama, which usually only gets to, about this tall. Or it can get like 15 or, 12 inches or something. But this is a monster. It can get 30 to 36 inches tall if you water it. Very beautiful, light green, slender leaves. And then you get these big eyelash seed heads that mature and dry, and that's the way it looks. It's a phenomenal plant, Blonde Ambition. It was brought to us by David Solomon. It's also deer resistant. Um, Beautiful ornamental grass, full sun, part shade, moderate watering. I think to xeric is is uh, is what it'll take. But I do think that it's a native plant. If you water it at a moderate level, it's going to get, in my mind, actually a little too big, and that's what I think this is, a little too big. But it'll live, and it won't peter out on you by doing that. So back to meadows. I put this in because this is the conservation garden park in Utah, and you should go there if you have a chance. They're open during the week, and they are focused on low water plants and irrigation, low water, everything like that. And they don't focus on natives so much. They focus on what plants are available. And in this right here, you can see this is Korean featherweed grass. Now this garden was designed um, by the director there, and I think it's one of the best examples of more of a medium to tall grass prairie um, that's not out of control in terms of these are all, for the most part, clump grasses. There's even Russian sage in here. That can go to seed a little bit. There's a bunch of coreopsis. There's things that normally aren't in prairies, and this shows it. There's New Mexican feather reed grass in here. There's blonde ambition in here as well. But if you're trying to create something unique in a meadow form, this is it. And always in your meadows, you have to have some sort of form of echinacea. Plant Select promotes Tennesseensis, but there's other ones, Pallida, other natives. But the reason is their seed heads are just so valuable against this brown drop background of a meadow. Woodward junipers. Everybody should have this up there. This plant actually was pulled out of the USDA research station in Cheyenne, which is now called the High Plains Arboretum. I highly recommend you go there. It's free. They did incredible work from the 1920s all the way to the 1970s, and then the study ended. The government said, "Okay, we're going to change now. Go to grasses or something, prairie." And so they turned off all the water. And Scott Skogerbo, who is the propagator at Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery, was a historian, and he would go up there, and all the plants are accessioned, and he knows where they came from. And he's looking at them going, well, these plants have been living off of native precipitation for 30 years. We need to use these plants. And so Woodward juniper was one of them. And that's that one right there next to one of the caretakers' houses. Phenomenal. There's another one way over there. But they get quite tall. They don't need any water at all. As a matter of fact, the less you water them, the more narrow they stay. This is a picture I took in Casper. Here's another one right here. Wonderful little tight areas. And the thing to think about with junipers is everybody has them marked as full sun right now. But if you drive around, you find them in full shade. This plant could be in shade. Just as like Guernsey green juniper, which is a matte juniper horizontalis, that is another Kelly Grumman's. I didn't feature it in here, but that's actually a dry shade plant as well. Kelly should be able to get those as too. But here's Woodward juniper in a crevice garden down at the 82nd and Sims in Denver. And if you have a chance, you can swing by there. It's near the pickleball courts. This area is actually really big. This crevice garden was put in 2014. It gets very little water, and you don't get a lot of weeds in it. And this is where I think our weed technology is changing, because this over here is what is traditional. They put weed barrier cloth under here, and then they poke holes and put the plants. And when I go there, all this area has weeds. This area does not have weeds, probably because it doesn't get as watered as much, or the water runs off. And the other reason is that so it doesn't have a chance to hit that right moisture temperature um, opportunity to germinate, but also that down in here, the soil, the wind blows all this dirt around and it catches in there. And then when you have a weed barrier cloth, it holds moisture for a period of time. And that's what germinates those seeds. You should go down there and check it out. This is the full length of that garden. This is in the wintertime, of course, Woodward juniper again. These plants here are actually Plant Select. This is Standing Ovation, little blue stem. You can find it on the website. If you look the opposite way of that crevice garden, this is the landscape that they put in. So they paid a lot of money to do a big crevice garden, which was really cool, but they have a huge area to fill in, so they did the rest traditional. This is Spirabolus wrightii. This is a giant Sacaton grass. It's fantastic. Um, it's deer resistant. It blooms. It's a big plant, just put it that way. But it blooms late summer. You get it for those ornamental seed heads. It's very open, very arching. Takes up a lot of space. So be sure to give it that space. Every spring, you'll just cut that down to about a foot, and then it'll rejuvenate again. What I like to do with Spirabolus and other large grasses is I like to plant a bunch of bulbs in around here. And the reason is that when I cut this back in the spring, these usually fall down and make great insulation for any kind of bulbs, daffodils, or whatever you got in there. And then when you shear this back in the spring, these guys come up, the tulips, and they, boom, you have great instant color. This is fern bush. I think I covered that in the next one. This is actually hot wings back here. There's a whole mess of Plant Select plants down at that area. But you'll find that this area here gets tons of weeds, and it's because of that traditional landscape weed barrier cloth. My COVID project was to put in a crevice garden myself. So there you go. I got some iris in there. The variegated ones are really cool. Water it very low. But this is how it started. And I share this because I want you to get interested. I want to share the interest or get people inspired to try something new. All this material that you see in here is mostly crush refines, less than 10% organics mixed in with it. I bare rooted all these plants. This was my garden in 2020 of May. This is after I planted it. There are all the little plants in there. That's it. Then I went and about the bare rooting. I suggest the weeds management is that the bindweed I'm finding really struggles in that porous media because every time you pull it, it sets it back way more. So some plants, and luckily bindweed's one of them that doesn't like to root out. You have other plants that really root out in that stuff very, very well. And a lot of the native, crevice gardening plants are that. Anyway, so 1 year later in May, this is 1 year later, that was all those plants that I put in. In 1 month later, that's what it looked like in June of 2021. That's pretty incredible. And these are my desert penstemon, and they're too big. It's almost like it has too much organics in terms of 10% in there. I think that these guys just thrive too much on that. There's my small little voodoo rose. I have shimmer primrose, a whole bunch of other ones in here. But for tight, small places, crevice gardens work very well. They're fire-wise, they're pollinator gardens, they're water-wise, and they're just super fun to arrange those rocks in something. This is it in last summer. This was it in last spring or the spring before. This was in the early spring. This plant here is a fantastic plant. I'm going to start pushing faster because I know time is of the essence here. This is the new crevice garden at Isaiah Smith's house, and he is or was the propagator at Cheyenne Botanic Gardens. He still works there, but he's got a new title now. This is so cool. And to me, this is screaming Wyoming. I mean, if you've got mining going on and you've got alpine plants, you should be doing stuff like this. So he pulled it out, and people were really nervous as his neighbors were nervous. And then now they're just complimenting him about it. It's so beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. I'm so happy he's doing it. And he's growing a lot of weird plants. This is the hummingbird trumpet mint, modernella. This grows really, really well in porous medias. It does not do well in soils. I would think this was a zone 5, but this is it's supposed to be a zone 5, but I'm going to see whether or not it lives for him next year because I think it will. He had some other plants that I thought would. We have a plant coming in next year that is also a great high elevation plant that I just thought I'd throw in here. This is a rambler mountain fleabane. It'll be perfect for those kind of crevice gardeny sorts of things. Into the woodies, we have the weeping white spruce, just a phenomenal plant. It's native all the way from Canada down. They've changed the scientific name from Picea glauca back to, they've put it all into one. It's, I'm not going to remember. Anyway, this weeping form is just like a Hansel and Gretel image of some places. Then we have when I think of that weeping sorts of tree, it can get really tall. It can get like 30, 40 feet tall. If you go to Red Butte Gardens in Utah, that's how big it is. But it fits nicely between the houses and things like that. Kinsley's Ghost, one of the best plant select plants we've ever had. It was introduced way back in like 2006. And 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, no, it's 3 years, I guess now, 2.5. Proven winners came to Plant Select and said, we like that plant. We want to have exclusive rights to it. I asked all of our growers if that was okay, and they said, sure. And so you will find this plant. It's a Plant Select plant, but it's going to be in a Proven Winners pot. The bonus about this is that it's going to be fully available, which is great. This is that fern bush, and I bring it up because this is the best pollinator plant you'll ever have. And if you have kids, you or grandkids, this is so much entertainment. You come to like second week, first week in July, this thing flowers, and it is all white, and you'll find everything from predatory spiders, bees, bumblebees, flies, earwigs, everything. I'm not kidding, and it's so entertaining. And none of them care about you. They only are looking at the flowers. It's so busy with activity. This shrub can get really huge if you don't do anything about it. It can get like 5 feet, 6 feet tall. It'll start to flop once it starts to get tall. So I usually recommend that you shear this plant in the spring, shear it back to about 3 feet high. It'll improve the branching, and it flowers on new wood, so you'll still get all those flowers. You'll even get more flowers when you shear it every year in July. Such a fantastic plant. You can see it's native out to what, Nevada and Arizona, Utah. Just such a good plant. Wax flower. This was a plant that was introduced a long time ago from Plant Select, one of the first ones, and it fell out of favor in 2012 because it was hard to grow in a pot. Now somebody has cracked the code on bringing it from seed to a 1 gallon finished product, and it's available in the market. It has very, very fleshy velvet leaves or fuzzy leaves, blooms white in the springtime, and then it has red fall color. Uh, it's 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 just a really great plant. I'd highly recommend it. It's the only plant in Colorado that is native to that is in the hydrangea family. And that's the other thing I promote with this background fern bush is it blooms the same time as hydrangeas. Everybody's get pushed hydrangeas, hydrangeas, hydrangeas. I call this the Western hydrangea, which is better. And it doesn't need any water after that. And again, it's deer resistant. It's just so cool. Okay. Anyway, silver totem buffalo berry. This one gets a little spiny, has thorns. They're not a ton, but they're enough to keep the mailman from walking through your garden as he goes down from house to house. But it can get about 12 feet tall. It's a native plant. There are male and females. This one's a female. If you have native buffalo berries around, you'll find that you'll get some red berries in the wintertime through into spring, which is kind of cool. But a fantastic plant, sort of silvery foliage. It'll get damaged in the snow, but you can prune those out and it'll quickly fill in. But it's great for tight spots. And is it deer resistant? Yes. Wow. Hot Wings Maple. This is one of the flagship, I think, one of the really what Plant Select is known for in terms of trees is Hot Wings Maple. It was discovered here in Fort Collins out of a seed collection and at Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery. And it blooms white flowers, clusters of white flowers that are noticeable, and you'll find bees on them. I couldn't find the picture that I had of the bees visiting those flowers, but like a lot of maples do not show their flowers. They bloom really early and they're really small and insignificant. This one is not. This one has showy flowers. Pollinators visit it, and then come in like July, you'll get these red samaras, and it looks like the whole plant is in flower, but they're not flowers. They're just the samaras. It's incredible. It's beautiful. You can buy these in multi-stems. They get 18 feet tall. They get 15 feet wide. You can also buy them as tree form. But then what's really cool about this one, better than any of the other maples, is that that is the fall color. You get this mix of red and burgundy and yellow. It is a all around fantastic plant. The only downside to this plant is that the branches in the wood can get brittle and they can break in the winter snow, but they fill in. Maples grow very quickly. Another plant that I think is worth the investment is sucker punch. It really makes me sad when people have Canada Reds in their yards or you see them in the landscapes at commercial places because it's such a waste of energy. You know, Canada Reds are a shrub that is pruned into a tree that happens to have purple foliage. And every year that tree grows bigger and bigger at the base of it, you're going to find suckers coming up, and every year you have more and more maintenance. Sucker punch named such because it does not sucker down at the base. You can get a low branch every once in a while, but it doesn't sucker down at the base. When it flowers in the spring, um, Early spring, it's white flowers, clusters of white flowers like you find on a choke cherry, and the foliage emerges as green. And then about 10 days later, it turns purple. So then in the summertime, you'll have this purple tree growing, and then it sends out another flush. And it, actually, the new flush has green leaves on it again, and you'll see this kind of green purple tree. But then 10 days later, you'll have it purple again. Anyway, this tree grows to like 25 feet tall. It's well worth the investment. It grows a little bit slower than choke cherries, and I think that's one reason nurseries don't particularly like it because it takes another year to grow, but it's worth the investment. So, I looking to the future, I'm hoping that when you step out of your house, you may see something like this instead of a lawn. There's so many plants like plants in here. Purple Mountain osteospermum. Here's that hummingbird trumpet mint. Here's that kind of creek in flower, the buckwheat. This is actually coral baby penstemon, arctostaphylos. Then we have linum narbonensis. This is a beautiful flax that is should be up there. This is all seafoam sage. That's a plant select garden. It's pretty cool. But what do plants? What do I? When my one of my closing slides here is what do our landscapes look like in the future if we actually have a house that has land anymore? Who knows? But this house here in Fort Collins is a place that I recommended, made a recommendation a long time ago because I coached the son of these people, and they had a traditional green lawn. They said, "What should we do in the back here?" I said, "You need to make this a meadow because on the right side of this picture is still their property, but even further beyond outside that picture, they're at open space. That open space looks like this." I was like, "You need an infinity garden where you look off your porch and you just see everything open, like native-y kind of things." And they actually did it. So I see HOAs, they're going to have native plants, back 40, all these grasses. This is Garetta grass. It's fantastic. This is not native. It looks like a plant that belongs in the desert. This is Cistus purgans. I don't think it's hardy up there, but you can put these different plants from around the world in these situations that are water wise. That's what this is, a water wise lawn. This is buffalo grass in here. Over here, they actually have a pollinator garden. They have a vegetable garden. They actually have a crevice garden right up by the house. Now, crevice gardens are pollinator gardens, water wise, and they're fire wise. There's just such great things about them that haven't been discovered yet. Now, I also included solar rooftops. What are we doing today that's going to be around in 60 years? We are planting trees. And when we say, trees, 60 years, that's pretty short-lived. I mean, that's like they will be around. Now, do you want to plant one next to your house? Like when we have the high wind warnings down here this last year in the spring, they turned the electricity off for 2 days because they were afraid it was gonna cause another fire like they had in Boulder. And the first mindset that I had was, I need solar. Well, if I had solar and I had a huge tree here, that would be a bummer. So I'm kind of suggesting that really might think more about shorter trees planted further away from the house because one, in 60 years, if we don't have enough water, a shorter tree requires less water than a large tree. And you've saved that real estate on top of your house to actually have solar so that the electricity company can go ahead and turn off their electricity in high wind areas and you'll still be able to charge your phone. Anyway, that's what the future looks like to me. Please join our newsletter if you haven't. Got lots of great stuff in there. Share a bunch of things. Grace has a bunch of videos on stuff. My name is Ross Shrigley, and if I will go through some of these questions, but you're free to unmute, say hello. Sorry that went just a little bit longer than I thought, but here we go. Wendy, where is the Denver Garden to drive by? Oh, you know what I'll do is I will share with Kelly a point of interest map that I have on Google Maps. And it links everything from, I think I have it from the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens all the way down to, I know it goes to Denver. But you can also go to our demonstration gardens on the Plant Select website and look up where those are and actually go see some of those plants in somebody else's garden right away. But uh, there you go. Question that where is the Denver Garden to drive by? It's called Summer Home Gardens. If you Google it, you can find it. It'll pop up.
Well, listen, I loved it, Ross.
Uh,
I took 3 pages of notes. Super, super, super helpful. Some of it, I loved the nudge that you gave us in a couple cases. We need to expand some of our own opportunities to test some of these. I would love to try to figure out how to expand some of the diversity and some of the plant materials up here, and I really sincerely appreciate the nudge you gave on some of those.
good. You're doing a great job, Kelly.
Well, thank you to the attendees. I really appreciate you guys logging in. I hope it was helpful to you, Ross. Can't thank you enough, and to everyone, happy holidays from me. I'll give you the last word, Ross.
Yeah. Hey, happy holidays, happy gardening. Be safe. Take care. Thank
Well,
you.
thanks so much. Bye bye.
Bye.